The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often, he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome in, folks. I'm Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor, and today you're going to hear an up-to-date story on Seabridge Gold. Seabridge is listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol SA, on the Toronto Exchange under the symbol SEA, and my longtime friend Rudi Fronk, who is a co-founder of the company and today the chairman and CEO, is going to join me in just a minute. You're going to hear about the evolution of a story where seemingly a lot of people are still like 10 or 15 years behind on what the company has done and what the company has accomplished. In fact, for me, when I first learned about Seabridge, not long after Rudi and his co-founder, Jim Anthony, started the company, it was a favorite trading vehicle of mine for a long time based on the swings in gold. But I've long since come to the conclusion that this is not a company that you want to trade. This is one you want to own going forward for its world-class reserves of both copper and gold, frankly, about the best when you add in the jurisdiction, everything else that you're going to find today on planet Earth. But before we get there, a couple of quick preliminaries. First of all, Rudi and or myself might be making some forward-looking statements. So here's the notice of that from their presentation. Always do your own homework, folks. Make sure that you spend some time, even after we're done here today, visiting the company's website, follow them on social media, get on their email list, etc. Likewise, yours truly for a long time has followed the company. They've been a recommendation of mine for a long time. From time to time, as other companies do, Seabridge will hire us additionally to do some follow-on media work and stuff like this video that you're watching today. So we wanted to let you know that as well. So Rudi and Jim started at a very propitious time when the last major secular bear market for gold was ending back in 1999 to 2001 timeframe. They've built a company which to this day a lot of people don't understand, in my view. You've got, again, a world-class gold and copper project where the story has gone from people believing, some of them seemingly still, that yeah, it's a huge project, it's great, it's in a good jurisdiction, but you know, not good enough, not good enough grades, not good enough this or that, to now, as Rudi's going to explain in just a moment, having some just phenomenal economics and probably to the point where they're going to have a development partner in before too terribly much longer. So without further ado, I want to bring on and introduce to you again, my longtime friend, Rudi Fronk, who is the chairman and CEO of Seabridge Gold. Rudi, welcome.
Chris, great to connect with you again. It's always fun.
Yeah, it is. And it seems like we're always leading off with the same story. We've got certainly a strong gold price, a halfway decent copper price, which I think is going to go parabolic in the coming few years when people understand the shortages going forward. And yet still not a whole lot of respect in the markets for most exploration stories, let alone yours, which is frankly, I think, one of the best ones on the planet. But before we get into the different moving parts, we're going to start out, of course, with your flagship KSM project. Expand on my quick comment of just a minute or two ago and explain what prompted you and Jim to put this company together and the method to your madness as you did it over the years.
Madness is correct. When I think back, it's been 25 years now since we launched Seabridge. When I started the company, I had not yet turned 41. I turned 65 last year, and now I'm a Medicare recipient. So it's been a long haul, but it's been a very rewarding haul. I mean, the team we put together at Seabridge is second to none. The board is fabulous. But most importantly, these assets are incredible and significantly undervalued in the current market.
Well, no question. And as I said a minute ago, that it seems as though we're always having the same story of how the market's just not responding to metals prices or to your evolving story. Um, you've got right now, and I'm going to let you correct me on the numbers, but you basically have, if you take just the proven and probable reserves that you have of gold, most of that is at your flagship KSM project in British Columbia, and the measured and indicated, which is the next category, you've got about 100 million ounces, give or take, of gold. You've got many billions of pounds of copper. If you add it all up, you can almost double some of the numbers that you got. It's just mind blowing, and especially in the kind of jurisdiction you've got. I know you've always been a stickler to avoid troublesome jurisdictions. 4 out of your 5 major projects, any one of which could be a flagship project for a smaller company. You've got 5 potential flagship projects. They're all in North America, 4 in Canada and 1 in the US, and we're going to go through all of them. But give me the accurate numbers of what you've got, and why Seabridge is so undervalued, as I see it, at least based on how much gold and copper you've got per share.
Well, so when we formed this company in 1999, we saw a lot of upside in the gold price. Gold was about 260 an ounce back then. And our goal was to create what we thought would be the industry's best play to a rising gold market by building a company that provided more gold ownership in the ground per share than any company on the planet. The amount of dilution that happens in the mining space is outlandish. Companies issuing share after share after share without offsetting that dilution with accretion to ounces or accretion to anything. We focused on the idea of, yeah, we're willing to buy things and advance projects to exploration, provided that that work would result in growing ounces per share. So if you look at us today, to put it all together, we've got about 85 million shares outstanding. We have 170 million ounces in all resource categories, which means that each one of our shares is backed by over 2 ounces of gold in the ground. And we have over 54 billion pounds of copper in all resource categories, meaning that in addition to the 2 ounces of gold per common share, each one of our shares is backed by almost 700 pounds of copper. We have more copper per share or more gold per share than any company on the planet by a long shot.
That's phenomenal. And it's, of course, again, one of the reasons why I long since told my readers, look, this is not a stock we trade anymore. Hindsight being 2020, you can trade all different kinds of stocks that follow the vagaries of investor sentiment and the metals prices. But this is something that, if you have any reason to believe, and I've talked about this in many contexts, as have you, that both gold and copper are going to do well in years to come. This has got to be, in my view, one of the anchors to your portfolio. And I mentioned earlier, Rudy, that a lot of people are very behind on their perception of Seabridge, and one of the key reasons, I think, for that is that copper, in the initial potential development plan for the early 35, 40 years of KSM, copper plays such a pivotal role and is now a second major attraction, that has vastly improved the economics to the point where your all-in sustaining costs for gold production, once that gets started, using the copper as a credit, was, I think, what your last numbers were, $600 an ounce of gold, all-in sustaining costs.
Yeah, that's even more than all-in sustaining costs, because that
Wow.
cost also includes the initial capital. When companies report their all-in sustaining costs in the gold sector, they forget to talk about the initial capital that was spent or has to be spent. It's from that point forward. So our $600 an ounce estimate includes the upfront capital, the sustaining capital, the closure costs, the reclamation costs, and the operating costs net of base metal credits. And that's at $600 an ounce. To put that into perspective, the gold industry today is reporting an all-in sustaining cost of about $1,400 an ounce. This project will be able to make gold for $800 less per ounce than the industry is making gold for today.
Wow, that's remarkable. And I, as you know, of course, we've known one another for a long time, and I've followed this every step of the way. It just keeps getting better and better. And one of these days, a light bulb's going to go off over people's heads. I think that, to be fair, some investors look at this and it's too big a project. It's going to be hard to get financed, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that once people are disabused of that, it'll get taken seriously. You know, the so-called Lassonde curve, that you and I both know of very well, and I'll put it up on the screen here. You know, when you have initial discoveries, oftentimes you have big moves in a share price, whether it's a copper, gold, whatever discovery. Then that early euphoria peters out, investors start to leave, and it's when the bigger reality sets in down the road that, hey, this thing really is going to get built. They really are going to sell this stuff. That's when you get your next big move. So there's a couple aspects of that, Rudy, that I want to talk about where it concerns your flagship KSM property. One is, of course, I guess go back to the beginning of why you're in that location. You're in what's called the Golden Triangle in the province of British Columbia. It's one of the best places on the planet ever for gold, silver, and more. And it's a great jurisdiction, a great place to do business. But like every place, you know, you need permits, you need to get this and that. You guys are pretty much almost a home plate, however, as far as those are concerned. And I want you to explain, especially the news that just came out, which you alluded to previously that you were preparing for, but you just made application to the province of British Columbia to have what is called substantially started designation. Tell us how we got to this place from this big, but okay, so what, too big, you know, little gold exploration project to now you got enormous amounts of copper and gold reserves, proven and probable reserves, and now getting to the point where you're likely to bring in a development partner.
Well, it's been 24 years of hard work. We acquired KSM back in the year 2001 from Placer Dome. Placer Dome at the time was the third largest gold company on the planet. They had spent about $25 million at KSM, defining two deposits, at least the start of two deposits, Kerr and sulfurettes. They had reported a resource of about 3.4 million ounces and just over 2 billion pounds of copper. We saw upside, so we went in and tried to buy it. And they sold us this asset for $200,000 after spending $25 million on it. Again, a clear indication on how big companies can misallocate capital over time and do deals at the wrong time. So we then started to work on KSM over time. We started drilling there not until 2006, found Mitchell in 2006, which was the third deposit, found Iron Cap in 2010, the fourth deposit, and then we purchased a deposit from our next door neighbor, Pretium, called East Mitchell in 2020. We now have 5 deposits there. All 5 deposits, each of the 5 deposits has over 10 million ounces of gold. And by the way, we just announced a pre-feas on another project, Courageous Lake, that gives us a 6th deposit of more than 10 million ounces.
Well, we're going to get to Courageous Lake in a second, but the neat thing, and again, this is an indication that a lot of folks that maybe back when followed Seabridge and kind of went away, didn't pay attention, don't realize what's going on. I talked to somebody, for example, Rudy, just at the New Orleans Investment Conference last fall, and you came up and Seabridge came up, said, yeah, well, you know, I don't know, the block caves are tough, they're expensive and whatnot. And I said, well, you obviously missed the memo that this thing is going to operate for 40 years. There's not going to be a block cave. Yeah. And one of the reasons that you got that other project from Pretium is so that in the early years, you're going to have higher grade stuff than what you thought was going to be possible at one time. And it's all going to start with essentially 2 surface open pits.
Yeah. No, agreed. And that's the reason we purchased East Mitchell, was because we saw a de-risking of the asset by removing the block caves, at least in the early project life. And when you look at it, it made a big difference, East Mitchell bringing that in. We now can show a project that produces over a 33-year initial mine life, averages over 1 million ounces of gold production a year, and 178 million pounds of copper a year. That's a big mine in anyone's book. And that mine plan only captures about 25% of the resources we have there. We then went on to show a subsequent mine plan that tackles the higher grade copper deposits at Kerr and Iron Cap that add another 39 years of mine life on top of the 33, and combined that captures less than 40% of the project's resources. This project is going to be a mine once built and producing metal for multi-generations. And I think that's why we have the support we do of the indigenous people around the project. They see something here that's a game changer in their communities and their, not just their lives, but their kids' lives, their grandkids' lives, and even beyond that.
Well, I still want to get to this substantially started thing, and so people can understand that you're pretty much, barring something totally out of left field in the home stretch. But tell us where you're at, and I know you can't divulge private stuff and not non-public stuff, with specificity. But I know you've had a lot of people for a while looking over your shoulder. Increasingly, as you have de-risked it, as you have brought bigger amounts of copper into the project, I know you've got a lot more serious people looking over your shoulder. What would you tell folks today as we're kicking off 2024 is your game plan for that inevitability, I think, of bringing in a development partner? Is everybody happy now, or are some parties getting to be happier with what they're
Well,
seeing?
I think our timing is finally right. If you look back over time, look, we've been talking about a joint venture for a long time. We recognized almost from day one, once we started drilling the Mitchell deposit, we knew we had a monster there. And we knew that as a company ourselves, it was going to be well beyond our capability to build and operate a mine. So we started engaging with the big companies pretty early on to get them associated with the project, understanding the project, with a view that at some point in time we'll get a joint venture done. We also took this project successfully through the environmental assessment process, which also differentiates KSM from other projects. We're permitted. Most of the big projects aren't. So we're now advancing discussions with joint venture partners. When we first went out to try and bring a joint venture partner in, it was 2014, right after we received our environmental approvals. And guess what? If you remember back then, Chris, the gold market was pretty crappy. Gold had gone from 1900 down to 1050, and gold equity valuations were horrible. So we couldn't get a joint venture done then, although we got pretty close. We then continued work and then brought it forward again in terms of joint venture opportunities. And then unfortunately, COVID hit. As we know, COVID shut down Canada for almost 3 years. No one could do any due diligence, get to site. We're now at a point, however, where we've done all the work we believe necessary to show the best project we can, with still a lot of upside beyond that. We got an extension of our environmental assessment approvals now till 2026, and we're now just about done in terms of the work we think necessary to ensure that our permits are good for the life of the project. There's a concept in British Columbia known as substantially started, that if we can achieve that designation, all of the approvals we have from the environmental side are then good and valid for the life of the project. So in 2021, we decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and get that designation. It's going to be expensive. We knew that. It's involved building permanent infrastructure that's required for the overall project. So we went out and raised about $500 million Canadian from Sprott royalties and Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. And we're now using those funds to complete substantially started activities. And as you mentioned, just yesterday, we announced we've now filed the formal application for that designation. We've now spent over $440 million over the past 2.5 years on early site construction to get this designation. Along the way, the benefit to the First Nations was phenomenal. Of the $440 million we spent, over $250 million was dedicated towards First Nation companies or companies that have joint venture relationships with First Nations. So this project is moving forward. If you want to be part of it, get on the bus, because in the not too distant future, we'll be announcing a partnership with a major mining company that'll turn this metal in the ground into metal in our pockets.
Well, and again, and I'm going to repeat it here because it bears repeating. That's the second big move that a company is ever going to have based on the Lassonde curve. When you get to the point where you had the big move years ago with the discovery, things peter out, the market changes, etc. You have highs and lows for metal prices, but once the reality sets in, that, hey, they really are going to be producing 1 million ounces of gold a year. Hey, they really are going to be producing, what do you say, 100 and how many pounds of copper?
178 million.
178 million pounds of copper. I don't think you need all 5 fingers on one hand to count how many projects on this planet are that size at an all-in sustaining cost for gold with copper credit of $600, as you qualified that a minute ago. Just a no-brainer, and I'm looking forward to it because you worked real hard, Rudi, and I've known for a long time, and I'm looking forward to when this thing really starts to break ground and you get that recognition. But moving on, I want to talk about Courageous Lake next. I was going to first talk about your neighboring property, Iskut, which could one day be a clone. of KSM. We'll get to that in a minute because you've had news out recently on some exploration work there. But you mentioned Courageous Lake. You just came out with an updated PFS. Great numbers, 10 million plus ounces of gold. And really, it's one that's it's everything these days is less remote, not because of communication, but because governments improve infrastructure, et cetera, over a period of time. But tell us a bit about Courageous Lake and why you think that that's an especially misunderstood and underpriced asset and part of your story.
I think some of that is quite honestly self-inflicted because we've done very little work on it over the past several years. So Courageous Lake is an asset that we acquired from Newmont and Total Energy back in 2002. It was right at a time when Newmont was consolidating the merger between Franco-Nevada, the original Franco-Nevada, and Normandy Mining. And they were looking to sell non-core assets to raise cash to pay off Normandy's hedge book, which they didn't like on gold. So we were able to step in and buy this asset for, I think, $5 million on a project that at that time had 5.5 million ounces of known resources. Previous owners had spent over $200 million at Courageous Lake, believe it or not, and we bought it for $5 million. We started working on that pretty quickly. We expanded the resources from the 5.5 million ounces that we knew was there on acquisition to over 11 million ounces. And then and we caught that first wave of the Lassonde curve. At one point in time, Courageous Lake on its own generated a market cap to our shareholders in excess of $500 million. We then continued to advance the project, and we were having success at KSM. So we kind of stepped back from Courageous Lake, but completed a pre-feasibility study at Courageous Lake in 2012 at a time when we probably shouldn't have done the work, because at the time, the Canadian dollar was essentially at par with the US dollar, which is not good for Canadian assets that have all their revenues in US dollars, but most of their costs in Canadian dollars. So the PFS at that time showed a very marginal project, a project that would have a 15-year mine life, but would take 12 years to recoup the initial investment. All-in cost of production well above $1,000 an ounce at a time when the gold price was only at $1,300. So we shut the project down there. We continued activities at KSM. But if you fast forward to today, with gold, what it's doing has done since that time, but more importantly, a weaker Canadian dollar, we decided, let's bring out Courageous Lake again. So a little over a year ago, we decided to go out and update the pre-feas because it's getting no value to our shareholders right now the way it was sitting. We hired a very recognized firm of Senko to do the work for us on this pre-feas and just announced the results of that on Tuesday morning. We can now show a project, an initial mine life of 12.5 years, producing over 200,000 ounces of gold a year for those 12.5 years at an all-in sustaining cost of about $999 an ounce, $1,000 an ounce, call it. Again, $400 below the industry average today. But on top of that original initial 12.5-year mine life, by mining deeper in the open pit on existing resources, we could add another 15.9 years of mine life, still averaging over 200,000 ounces of gold production a year at costs well below the industry's all-in sustaining cost. So this is a project that also will have longevity. Right now, you're looking at a 28-year mine life combined, 200,000 ounces a year. The initial 12 years gives you a NPV after tax at a 5% discount rate of over $500 million. Obviously, at higher metal prices, it provides optionality and leverage as well. But here we're sitting with this asset 100% owned in a safe jurisdiction, advanced, 11 million ounces of measured and indicated resources, 2.6 million ounces of reserves there itself, and getting zero value to our shareholders. So we're going to go out and find a way to get value to our shareholders on this asset, because right now they're getting none. Yeah. It could be a sale of the asset where perhaps we keep a stream or a royalty. It could be a joint venture. It could be a spin out. So we need to look at all the different options and determine what's the best path forward to unlock value from Courageous Lake to our shareholders, and we're going to do that.
And that is chiefly gold. I mean, you don't have the elements of a big copper resource there and everything else, correct?
I wish we did, Chris, because having copper sure is helpful. No, we have a little bit of silver, but not hardly anything in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So there again, by the accounting rules, a $500 million or so net present value and little recognition in the share price, which unfortunately is par for the course with a lot of good companies these days, let alone one of the best ones as far as your overall resources. Let's move back to Iskut, because this is a project that you acquired a while back, and then I think you expanded the ground around it. You've got porphyry targets, you've got a lot more going on there, but you had some news come out recently from Iskut that seems to suggest that you could have something down the road that's yet another monster size thing. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so Iskut came about. So early on in our company's history, we took advantage of a down market. In 1999 to 2002, we bought KSM, we bought Courageous Lake, we bought a bunch of other assets that we've actually now sold since then. But when gold hit 1,050 again in 2015, we said, "Hey, it's our market to go out and buy again." So we looked at the portfolios of the companies, junior market, senior market, and wound up buying 3 new projects since 2015. Iskut first, then Snowstorm, and then 3 A.I.S.C. And we bought Iskut because it's within 30 kilometers of KSM, but more importantly, it could be another KSM. It's a project that upfront came with a small resource called Bronson Slope of about 2.2 million ounces of gold and 500 million pounds of copper. But what we saw there was not so much the Bronson Slope deposit. That's small by our standards. But what we saw, again, was a potential district play. So we've now conducted 3 or 4 years of exploration at Iskut, targeting and hopefully focusing into a big gold copper porphyry system. We are convinced we're there now. And this year we have a program for about $11 to $12 million to spend on additional drilling at Iskut, where we believe we have 3 gold copper porphyry intrusions that we could tag, and we're going to go after them.
Wow, 3 of them.
Yep.
Potentially. Holy cow. Well, folks, obviously, we're not even done yet. We got 2 more projects to talk about. I mean, there's a lot here to unpackage. Let me give you a quick reminder before Rudi and I move on to be sure you visit them, get on their mailing list, spend some time at their website. Make sure you keep up with me as well. Not for the first time, I'm imminently going to be redoing a special report of the National Investor that focuses on precious metals. Seabridge, again, is going to be one of the anchors of that report. You're going to have a lot more details on the story in it. If you're not already on my mailing list, make sure you get on it because you don't want to miss this, I guarantee you. And for a lot of the other companies out there too, we're not going to go into the macros thing right now. Maybe we will quickly at the end, Rudi, for your thoughts, but I'm very bullish long-term on gold and copper, both. I think I've been somewhat agnostic to mildly bullish for a while, and correctly so, but a lot of the things in my view are taking shape in the economy and in the markets that caused the gold price from 2008, right after the crash of everything, to 2011 to triple. And in many interviews, I've explained that we're starting to check the same boxes now with the big picture situation as we did back then. And I'm looking forward to that. I think we're talking months, not years, but that's my bullish commodity commercial that I had to inject in here, with which I know you agree. So Iskut, you're going to be doing some additional drilling there again in 2024?
Yeah, we have a big program planned. We'll have 3 rigs turning there, hopefully starting in June, and we've got 3 targets we plan on testing. But the prize will be finding another big gold copper porphyry deposit. We see so many similarities to KSM. It's quite embarrassing, actually. Same age of mineralization, same structural elements.
Wow.
In the same district. I mean, it's part of the Golden Triangle, like KSM is.
Right. You just took those words right out of my mouth. That's why you find things in this particular area, because there's only a handful of places on this planet. You could look at parts of the Abitibi in Eastern Canada. You can look at the state of Nevada, which we're going to wrap up with in a minute. But this is, again, one of those top places in the world for years, and still lots and lots more to discover. 3 A.I.S.C was another one of those recent acquisitions you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Rudi, and that's in the Yukon. Another project that you bought very nice terms from another company. Tell us what your plans are for that.
Well, it's a project we had been following for some time, but quite honestly, the valuation got ahead of us, and it didn't make sense to go after it because it wouldn't be accretive. However, At one point in time, when the previous owners was drilling this project and coming back with spectacular results, multi-meter intercepts within the first 50 meters of surface, in some cases averaging up to 2 ounces to 3 ounces of gold per ton. So we liked this project from the get-go, but the valuation at some point got to over $100 million. And it just didn't make sense relative to our valuation to go after it. And then guess what? We got COVID came along. Their valuation got decimated. They needed cash quickly, and we stepped up to the plate and said, we'll buy it. And we stepped in and bought it for 300,000 shares when our shares were trading at about $10 a share. So call it a $3 million acquisition. We think this project has legs to it as well. It's a large land package. It's over 300 square kilometers. There's over 30 kilometers of strike length of known gold mineralization. Most of the historic drilling was done in a concentrated area. So after we took control of this, we went out and got a longer-term exploration license for the project. And now we've completed our first drill program at 3 A.S., confirming the model, but also looking to areas where we can expand known mineralization. We'll be reporting the results of that program over the next few weeks, and we're going back at it again. We're quite excited about it. We think this adds another lever to the company in a project that, you know, has 5 to 10 million ounce potential in our view of high grade.
Right. Wow. And for those that don't know or don't follow the mining industry on a regular, even semi-regular basis, the Yukon has been a very up and coming destination increasingly. There's been some massive discoveries up there, a couple of high profile discoveries and sales of assets. Fireweed Metals, another one of our stable of companies, and among my recommendations has got just a mind-blowing zinc and lead and now tungsten projects in the Yukon. It's phenomenal what's up there. And so you've got pretty good access and infrastructure for what you need to do, correct?
Yeah, we've road access right to our project, which is nice. So yeah, we can get right in there. We have a camp there. We maintain an office in the Yukon. You know, when you get into a new jurisdiction, which the Yukon was first, the first thing you need to tackle is public relations with indigenous groups and the regulators. And that's something we've worked very hard on over the past 2 years after we acquired this, to let them know who we are, what our track record is, how we deal with in other jurisdictions with First Nations, what the opportunities will present themselves over time. And that's a big first step to get that work done.
Right. Now, I'll tell you, folks, the last project we want to talk about is Snowstorm in Nevada, which is, again, was one of your more recent acquisitions in the last several years. And this bears an especial notice, I think, because for a lot of years, which is why you, and you're entitled to do this, and you're correct in doing it, make a point of you have not spent tons of money just to do it. You've not, mined shareholders rather than discovering metals in the ground, but you have been perhaps the best example among explorers your size in North America for a long time of how you, when you spend money, when you sell shares, it's accretive, but you end up with more gold and copper, as you pointed out earlier, per share than what you started with based on your expenditure. And that came to the attention of a fellow named John Paulson, who's a very well-known gold bug, who had I think it was a hedge fund that he and Wayne Huizenga had together that owned Snowstorm at one time. Was that right, Rudy?
Yeah, it was actually a jointly owned company that held it.
Okay.
No.
And so these guys, they're not gold explorers and miners. They've got this asset, trying to figure out what to do with it. So they decided, let's find somebody who we trust and who is the best at what they do. And so they decided that they wanted Seabridge to explore this asset. And Paulson is one, of course, at that time, who made very clear his disdain otherwise for a lot of the resource companies that are out there that are terrible stewards of capital, that are dilutive and so forth. And he chose you because you're everything that the rest of them weren't. And that's a feather in your cap. And I think it speaks well from a billionaire who knows what he's doing, and he knows a thing or two about business, that of all the companies he could have chosen to turn this project over to, it's you. And that to me is one of the best sales points that you have as a company, and for which you should be congratulated. But this Snowstorm project is kind of in the fulcrum, I guess, of a few major trends in Nevada. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we call it our bullseye project. If you look at the 3 major gold trends in Nevada, the Getchell trend, the Northern Nevada Rift trend, and the Carlin trend, they all come together at Snowstorm.
Yeah.
So address is important. But more importantly, when we look at Snowstorm, what we saw initially was something that hopefully we can replicate what's been found down at Getchell. People, you might remember that back in the 1990s, there was a public company called Getchell Gold. They had found about 1 million ounces of gold on the Getchell trend and the Turquoise Ridge deposit. And Placer Dome came in and bought that company for $1 billion. They paid $1,000 an ounce in the ground when gold was trading below $400 an ounce because they saw tremendous exploration upside at Getchell. The person that led that charge at Placer Dome was Eliseo Gonzalez-Urian, who's been a director of Seabridge for the long run. And when Snowstorm came up for sale, we took a hard look at it. Eliseo was involved in a due diligence, and he believes that we have the potential to replicate that. Now, over time, Getchell grew from 1 million ounces to over 20 million ounces. And today it represents one of the cornerstones of the joint venture in Nevada between Newmont and Barrick. So our Snowstorm project sits just north of two of the biggest operating mines in Nevada. We see a lot of potential there. We've already confirmed that the structures that led to the mineralization at Getchell and Twin Creeks run into our project. We've confirmed that there is gold in the system. Now we need to vector into the high grade. Getchell Gold, I think the Turquoise Ridge deposit, I think averages like 13 grams per ton in terms of reserve grade. That's what we're looking for. But it's like finding a needle in a haystack. We have a lot of tertiary cover. We can apply geophysics, but the only thing that's going to find this is drilling. And we knew it was going to be a 5 to 10 year period to really do it justice. And we're now in maybe year 4 since we've started working on it. But we're still excited about it. We haven't had immediate success that you can say, wow, that's a home run. But these things take time.
Well, they do. And I know that Gold Rush, which is another one of the big projects, not too terribly far from where you're talking about, if I remember correctly, and if you've got a different number, please correct me, Rudy, but they spent $150 million drilling that thing before they found that big elephant of 20 million plus ounces.
Yep. Same thing on the Cortez trend. That's, if exploration was easy, everybody would do it.
And that's why few do, and fewer still are successful at it. Again, folks, lots of potential here. All 5 of these projects that Seabridge owns could easily be an anchor asset or flagship asset for most other companies. They've got 5. It's an incredible story. It's one that I think is going to surprise people one of these days soon, most likely when you do announce a development partner at KSM. Obviously you agree with me on the prognosis for metals prices going forward. I'm kind of curious to close with a little bit more nuanced of a question, perhaps, Rudy, and that is, and again, you can't divulge any specifics of conversations and parties and whatnot, but how are you finding conversations going with potential development partners as far as their outlook? Are they, for example, the big resource story in the last year or so has been uranium. Everybody realized, holy cow, it's not there. It's not been developed. The U.S. isn't importing all the uranium that we use. And so the uranium price has gone up 5-fold from its bottom about 2 years or so ago. And everybody has had the light bulb go off over their head on that, oh my God, before it gets even higher, we got to tie up supplies. Gold is one story, but copper is another. And copper, in my view, is going to be the next major story in the next couple of years, where people understand the perilously short supply with electrification and everything else coming on. How are you seeing conversations go in that vein? Are you seeing any urgency on their parts? Are they just being coy and trying to dicker? Or do they realize that, hey, maybe we got to get serious about a multi-generational gold and copper asset?
Well, I think for the first time in years, the big companies now recognize they need new projects. On the copper side, clearly we need new copper mines. If you look at the supply and demand forecast going forward, copper is going to be in huge short supply over the next few years. And we probably need a doubling of existing production just to meet demand within the next 5 to 7 years. And I can tell you firsthand, good luck getting a new copper mine built in 5 years. From discovery through engineering, through permitting, through construction, it's probably a 20 to 25 year cycle. So all of a sudden, with higher copper prices, new production is not just going to jump out. It takes time. So that's helpful to us. We're fortunate at KSM. This project is appealing to both the big base metal guys because of the copper, but also the gold companies because of the gold content. On the gold company side, most of the major gold companies are now admitting that, yeah, they want new projects, but they want new projects also that brings copper. Newmont's acquisition of Newcrest is a great example of that. I believe they bought Newcrest more for the copper production than for the gold production in terms of, bringing more copper into Newmont. You listen to Mark Bristow talk, all he wants to talk about now is copper, even though he's running the second largest gold company. It's all about copper, and he's going into Pakistan to develop a new project.
Well, Mark Bristow being the CEO of Barrick, and I'll add really quick as we close here, Rudy, to your story about Newmont. I was visiting recently with the son of the man who discovered while he was working for Newmont, the Fruta del Norte, huge high-grade underground gold mine in Ecuador. And he seconded to me the idea that the reason why Newmont is now going to get active again, part on its own and part buying Newcrest, even in Ecuador, which is a troubled country again recently, is because there is this, they may not wave flags out about it in public quite so dramatically, but everybody knows that we're in a lot of hurt globally in copper supplies and not too many years hence. To kind of piggyback on the one statistic you mentioned, I've got a graphic here that all of the copper consumed in the world up until the last century has been doubled through 2020 and will double again by 2050. It's remarkable. And as you pointed out, and we unfortunately feel it here in the US with development stage copper, nickel, and other projects that are mothballed or stalled for whatever reason, policymakers are going to guarantee that investors are going to get even wealthier if they're in the right place at the right time when these things spike. And believe me, folks, with copper and with a lot of things, you're going to see happen what we saw happen in the last couple of years with uranium. That's just the first of these things. And, for the valuation of Seabridge right now, this is a company, in my opinion, and I put my own money where my mouth is too, that's got to be a core part of your portfolio going forward if you understand what's coming and you understand gold and copper. Any other quick last words, Rudy, as far as mileposts to look for in 2024? You gave us some plans, and hopefully that's going to include news of a partner at KSM. But anything else?
Look, that's my prime objective for the year.
Okay.
I tell a lot of people nobody wants to get a deal done more than I do, with the exception of maybe my wife.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we're going to get a deal done. The market environment is ripe to get a deal done. We've got the best asset out there. We've got an asset that's going to produce metal, both gold and copper, for a long, long time. We've got a project that's gone through the environmental assessment process. We have a project that is supportive of all the indigenous groups around and local communities. And we've got a project that can show tremendous capital efficiency in a safe jurisdiction where you don't go to bed at night, wake up the next day and find out, oh, I don't own that anymore, do I?
Yeah.
So I think KSM really is a standalone opportunity out there. And as a result of that, just wait.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Again, folks, make sure that you keep in touch with us, visit Seabridge, get on their mailing list, follow the news that comes out. And again, yours truly as well for other information about Seabridge and my outlook on the metals generally. Make sure you're on my mailing list. You'll be getting those mailings and those special issues of the newsletter that I mentioned earlier very, very shortly. So, Rudi, thanks. A belated Happy New Year again. And one of these days, pretty quick, I'm sure our paths are going to cross again. It's always great when we get to see one another in person from time to time, as opposed to on here. So all the best, and I'm looking forward to better news and better days.
Chris, again, thanks for the time and the opportunity to chat with you today, and look forward to the next time we meet. Yeah. And in the meantime, take care of yourself.
All right, you too. Take care.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.